Hey there. Welcome to the Flute 360 podcast. I'm Dr. Heidi Kay Begay, and I'm a flutist, educator, coach, and podcaster. My God-given mission is to serve you. I am passionate about guiding you, the modern-day flutist, to discover your unique voice on and off the stage. The goal of this podcast is to help you thrive, both as an artist and as a musicpreneur. Go ahead and grab your espresso drink, your favorite notepad, and let's get to it. Today's episode 317 is titled, From Teacher to CEO, Unlocking Your Zone of Genius with Dr. Christine Gangelhoff. Hey 360er, I have a quick question just for you. Did you know that the Flute 360 Accelerator Group is your gateway to transformation as a modern-day flutist? This immersive experience helps you move past feeling stuck or unsupported, empowering you to build confidence, master your unique voice, and elevate your artistry and career. Through expert guidance and a supportive community, you'll gain clarity on your goals, overcome performance anxiety, and unlock innovative approaches to flute playing and teaching. Whether you're seeking to grow your studio, refine your craft, or create a career you love, the Flute 360 Accelerator Group gives you the tools to thrive. The next session is on Saturday, January 25th, 2025. Step into your potential and start transforming your flute journey today. Click the link in the show notes below. So with that being said, I cannot wait to pick your brain, Christine. And for the listeners out there, I just want to give them a little bit of context because your and my relationship is so special and so unique. I think it was 2016 was the NFA convention in South Carolina, North Carolina. And I saw one of your dear friends and colleagues, my first teacher, Diane Boyd-Schultz. We were chatting, and she was talking to somebody else. I was just literally a fly on the wall, buzzing in and coming in and being so rude and going, Diane. And I picked up a little piece of their conversation at the end. And she said, to this person, Joe, hey, Joe, just reach out to my friend Christine. She's the flute professor at the university in the Bahamas. She would be a great fit. And I literally, in 2016, your name just stuck with me. And you probably get this all the time. It was because your last name, Gangelhoff, was so unique. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Thought nothing of it. And then fast forward, I don't even know, 5-6 years, somehow our paths crossed. And since then, you and I have been friends, and we've been trying to work together in different collaborative ways. And here we are. And so anyways, that was a long-winded story, but I shared that because you just never know. You never know. And I'm so impressed by your work. And it only felt right and natural for you to come into 360's world and to share value with the 360ers out there. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks so much. That's such a fun introduction. And I couldn't agree more about it's such a small world, and you're right. You just never know. And shout out to Diane Boyd-Schultz. I mean, yeah, she's so great. So I'm glad that we share that in common and that we were able to meet like that.
Yeah. I think the world of Diane and the fact that you guys went to UNT together, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I just feel like when she said your name and I got to meet you, I just felt like it was a full circle moment for me and for little Heidi, because I'm here because of Diane. And it was just, I don't know, it was a very pinch me moment.
Yeah, very special.
Yeah, cool. So on that note, that was long-winded, but my listeners are so used to that. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your backstory. We know that you're in the Bahamas and you're a university flute professor, but you do so much more. You have this amazing business called SoundPath, and I just want to showcase what you are all about and what you're passionate about to the listeners.
Sure. So I have a pretty unusual path as both in my education and in my career. And it's definitely not traditional, and including what I'm doing currently. But so I'm a first generation college student. And so in high school, I knew I was obsessed with the flute from a really early age. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. But my parents they were very supportive, but they had no idea what to do. And so I just sort of figured it out on my own. And I ended up with 4 degrees, just kind of like figuring my way through it. I loved school so much, I just kept going back for more degrees. And I feel so fortunate. I had the best teachers that just gave me this amazing foundation. So I studied with Julie Bogorod both in high school and at the University of Minnesota, and then Dr. Mary Karen Clardy, both, as you mentioned, at University of North Texas, and Ransom Wilson and Keith Underwood. And so I feel so grateful to have been influenced by all of these teachers. And so they really instilled this sense of musicality, and they all had their different strengths. But at the same time, I had this sort of parallel life in ethnomusicology, because I was really interested in different world traditions and popular music. And so when I was in undergrad, I studied African flute and drumming with Soa Mensah, who's a master drummer from Ghana. And he was just a major influence in sort of my musical worldview. And so it sort of broadened my experience in classical music. And I always kind of I was never completely comfortable in the classical music world. And so I sort of had to forge my own path for that reason. And I tried to always kind of combine those two things because it was something that I felt really passionate about. So I would sub in orchestras and play classical music, chamber music, all these type of things. And at the same time, play in klezmer bands, Celtic bands, rock bands, all of these different things. And so that was how I basically felt like I had to create my voice as a musician. Mm. And so then at the same time in academia, I've had different positions, kind of different global positions. And as you mentioned, I'm currently at the University of the Bahamas. Before that, I was at Memorial University in Newfoundland, and which was amazing. It's just the most amazing culture there. And so I've always specialized in classical music, but then also researching wherever I happen to be. So in the Bahamas, I've been researching Caribbean composers, and that has been really interesting. And I'm also very involved in performing music of underrepresented composers and diversity in classical music in general. So that's been a big part of what I've been doing. And then also, so how I got to where I am today, all along the way, I worked with students, and it's been really rewarding. And I sort of discovered that I have this, I guess, like a knack of identifying students' strengths and helping them find their passion. And as an example, I had a student who had an issue with her flute, and she came to her lesson and she had repaired one of the keys with an eraser, a pencil eraser, and she shaved it and glued it in there to the exact height to where it wouldn't clank or anything. And which I thought, like, I would never think to do something like that. And I told my repair person that story, and she said, get that girl to repair school. And so I told the student, would you be interested in studying instrument repair? And she said, that's a thing. And she was so excited. And so she went to repair school, and now she has her own repair business. And so that was kind of a pivotal point for me, because I realized it made me realize that students really don't understand all of the different pathways that they can take. And I know you talk about this a lot. And I think people are more fixated on either being a performer or an educator. And those are kind of the two most common pathways. But there's so many more things in between, and so many more music adjacent career paths, and just so many more possibilities. And I found I really love guiding students in that way. Mm. And so that brings me to SoundPath, which is my college consulting practice, where I guide students who want to pursue music or performing arts in college. And I love it so much because it's basically combining all of my expertise from my being a student, from being an academic, a performer, an arts administrator, an author, all of those kind of things, all packaged together, that I can guide students in this way. So that's what I'm currently doing, and just really loving it. And it also allows me to collaborate, which is one of my favorite things to do.
I love that. Yes, 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 times 1,000. So I could go down 15 different rabbit holes with you right now because everything you said just got me sparked like, oh, here, inspiration there. The first thing that I want to unpack a little bit is you discovering that maybe ish to a certain degree, you didn't feel completely comfortable in the classical flute world. What gave you permission? Did you give yourself permission? Was it a mixture of seeking out counsel where your counselors and your mentors said, hey, Christine, like if you don't feel 100% here as a classically trained flutist, you can branch off, you can mix things up. So was it your own permission that you gave yourself? Was it mentors? Was it a hybrid? Like, can you go back to young Christine?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It was definitely more of just internal from myself and from my upbringing. I came from a family that was not musical at all. And I loved classical music. I mean, that's basically, I'm very comfortable performing classical music. And I feel like that's a big part of my identity. But it has always been the culture around it that I wasn't that cool with. And there on many levels. And I think part of it is also my work in ethnomusicology that gave me this sort of broader concept of music and what is quality. Some of the things in classical music, I feel, especially, it's different now, but when I was a student, especially as an undergrad student, there were very much more silos that all of these different things were in. And I sort of rebelled against that. And I feel like now it's more accepted. And the classical music world now, I feel like has changed a lot and is there's more cross-pollination and there's more acceptance of other styles and more people who are interested in collaborating across styles. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's changed in a positive way, but I didn't get a lot of guidance, I wouldn't say, in that. Okay. I sort of just did it on my own.
Okay. That's amazing. And you bring up a very good point. I don't know if you know this because I don't think I've shared this with you yet, but my master's thesis was based on Native American music, and I studied specifically the Hopi Indian tribe. And my husband, Begay, is like the most common Navajo last name. It's like a Johnson for American families. And so because of that marriage to him, my world opened up to ethnomusicology and studying other cultures, languages, and music and how it plays a role into their lives. And so I digress, but my point is you bring up a good point on how that world and studying music in other cultures with other languages and how music can be represented in different people's lives in different capacities, kind of like the corn grinding songs, right? These women are singing songs while they are grinding corn, and I'm sure you've seen similarities among, the music that you're studying now and the African tribes and things like that. And my sister's married to a Kenyan man. I'm married to a Native American man. My point is, once your blinders are kind of released and you kind of see the world outside of the one scope of musicians in the classical world, you realize that there are more possibilities, right? Music serves different roles in different people's lives. And so I think that's really monumental for you that you had that backstory and that background to give yourself permission, because that culture and the way music serves in those different worlds would give you permission to say, get off the page. It doesn't have to be just one thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I did not know that about you. So thank you for sharing that. And like I mentioned before, Soa Mensa, I think one of the things I learned from him was when I played in the African flute and drum ensemble, they use these traditional flutes from Ghana that are in an ensemble, and they all play together. And I remember the first time I heard that, I thought I had this like snobby attitude, and I said, "Can't they get those things in tune? Like they weren't in tune with each other." And so then Soa educated me and said, "That's intentional. Like the Balinese gamelan, it's also intentional, so it gets that shimmer." And so with the flutes, they're within a range. But he said, classical music, the pitch is, he gave this is like a finger motion, like it's this thick, like an eighth of an inch, actually way less than that. But in African music, the African aesthetic, it's a thicker texture.
Mm.
And that totally blew me away that, oh yeah, that explains a lot of African music and the kind of gritty texture and the more, so it's this just a different aesthetic. And so it just made me think a lot about tone and all of these different things about classical music. And it's also, interestingly, when I got to the Caribbean and started, that was another sort of light bulb moment for me. And this, we could go down a very long rabbit hole, but just the work I've been doing on Caribbean composers, because that really brought me to life. Because I thought, this is classical music, because this is living and it's relevant and it's part of the community in a lot of ways. And so that's been something else that I've really been enjoying. And it's just taken so many different directions and also led to so many relationships with people, with composers, with other musicians. And to me, that's all what it's all about.
You could have 10 different podcasts, and I want you to produce all of them by the end of the week.
Okay, yes, no problem.
Yeah, because you don't have, anything on your plate. Oh, shoot. No, I love it. It's so interconnected. You know what I mean? And I think what I've learned from different guests and friends like you who've come on the show is our background and our backstory and our foundational elements and things that we are raised with and experience, whether it's like family members or training or education or actual travel, it shapes us so much as human beings. And then when we go out into the world, we are multifaceted people. And the one thing that, and I'm saying this with a grain of salt, the one thing, but it's also valid, the one thing that kind of breaks my heart is when classically trained flutists think that that's all they are. That's the only identifying mark. And it's like, no, let's get off the page. Just because maybe that orchestral job didn't pan out or that academic professorship didn't pan out the way you had anticipated, it doesn't mean that your skill sets go to the wayside. It doesn't mean that you don't belong. It doesn't mean that you don't have a place in this world. Let's help you find that place. Let's help you find your unique thumbprint and really amplify it so that way you can serve your people in such unique capacities. So I know you're nodding your head and you're getting really excited.
I'm like, amen, sister.
Yeah. We are cut from the same cloth. I love it.
That's right.
So I know you agree with me. So how do you bring your high schoolers, collegiate students, in helping them, or maybe even an older generation, helping your clientele find their unique thumbprint, owning it, giving them permission to get off the page and maybe find not the exact path you went down, but you leading by example, by you saying, hey, this is what I did. You can too in your own right. What's their biggest hurdle? What does the process look like?
A lot of it is just exploration is a big thing, and reflection, because especially young people, they're not used to reflecting on what they've done or even what their strengths or interests are. And so just doing a lot of activities and just talking and bringing that out of them. And actually the essay writing too is a big part of it. And so that is something that I do, is getting them to sort of talk about what their interests and often, or their strengths and their experience. And many times they say, I don't have anything interesting, or they, and they're the things that they take for granted. And just like, for an example, I've worked with students who are interested in composing for video games, composing music for video games or films, and their parents, sometimes it's mistaken as they're lazy, or they're not academically inclined because they play video games all the time. That's all they do. And then when I talk to them, I say, what do you do when you're playing your video games? And they say, I'm listening to the music. Like, duh, that's what I'm doing. And then they're doing their own video game music on their DAW, and doing all of these really complicated things that they take for granted. And this is kind of true in academia too, and in arts basically when academics are putting together their portfolio or applying for promotion or tenure, in the arts, it looks different than in other disciplines, because what we do, artistic research, is not open, it's not explicit like it is in science. And you have to sometimes spell it out. So playing video games actually counts as research in some ways. Or in the academic world, watching YouTube videos or learning a piece of music involves researching the piece, researching the composer, but also researching different performances of it. And so listening to different interpretation, coming up with your own. So all of that is actually research. And so I really like to show students, you're actually doing research. They think of research, you have to go have a white coat on and be in a lab or be in a library. No, you can be lying in bed playing video games.
Yeah.
And that can count. If you're paying attention, if you're focusing on it in that way, that can count as research. And so and I do that at different levels. I've done that with graduate students, helping them find their dissertation, for example. I like to find out, what are you doing? Because they often will have strengths that they don't know that they have. And many times they end up doing their dissertation in something that they're already doing. And so those are some of the things that I do to help them find that direction.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And for the fact for you to own your skill sets and your strengths and say, hey, I'm really good at this, because not everybody is. Like, you can literally try to throw, I wouldn't recommend it, but throw somebody in that advisor seat, right? And from the onset or offset, or I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but just by appearances, by looking at that, you're like, oh, I'm using air quotes, that's easy. But when you actually sit down to do that, it's layered. There's so many layers, and finding and really being direct and going, okay, and finding that point of interest and uncovering the layers and unveiling the veil, and saying, oh, here, it's kind of like Michelangelo with David, the sculpture, unleashing David from the actual stone, right? And the fact that that that's your skill set and that's your strength, I'm so glad that you are serving our community in that capacity, because it's a lot. Well, for me, like, I help people too, but sometimes I have to really get into that seat and go, okay, like, it's easier said than done, because there's a lot to it.
Yes, there really is.
Yeah. So what is one of the biggest hangups you see with your clients when they start unpacking these layers, unpacking these boxes of finding out? You said going through tools such as essay writing and writing helps to unlock some of these things. Is there a certain hurdle that you see quite a bit throughout your clientele, like imposter syndrome or negative talk or things like that?
Yeah, all of the above, really, because so I'll try to remember, so imposter syndrome, definitely. And one of the other bigger hurdles, especially with younger students, is the hesitation to pursue music or performing art, to go into the arts. So one of the things I have to do, I have to determine, is that coming from the student or from the parent? And because not all parents are comfortable with that. And so I have to do a lot of explaining what a career in the arts looks like and the value of an arts degree. That's like a big part of what I do, because and this could be a part of many people's private studio. I'm trying to kind of connect to your audience too, because to sell private music lessons, you need to consider not just gaining the experience or the expertise on the instrument, but everything that comes with it. And so I spend a lot of time basically talking about how valuable a music degree is, and whether you end up as a professional musician or not. And because people think of it as a wasted degree. If you have a music degree and then you end up going into business or going into something else, why do you have that music degree? Well, you learn all of these skills along the way. And for example, medical schools and law schools love music students.
Mm.
And they have a very high acceptance rate into the program because, and in fact, there are some schools, there are not many, but I think there'll be more that have a pre-med track in music or a pre-law track in music, specifically for that, because they know music students work really hard and they're focused, they're disciplined, they're collaborative, they have all of these skills that they're looking for. And so, and I work with students who are actually STEM, they're really strong in the STEM field, and they want to major in pre-med or something, but they're very talented musically. So that's really common. And so sometimes they're on the fence. Do I want to follow my passion? Or so I have to work through it with them and their parents often. What is the most important thing for you? If you want a job at the end of 4 years where you're going to be earning a lot of money instantly, then probably music is not the thing to do if money is your absolute priority. But if you look at the end of, if you have somebody with a music or an arts degree and someone with a business or engineering, that type of degree, they eventually can catch up in salary, but it takes time for an artist to establish their career. But they can make a very good income, but it just takes time to establish yourself.
Yep.
Those are some of the things that I really have to work on with both the student and parent to find out where is this coming from, because a student can be really gifted and hardworking, but hesitant to really pursue that.
Yeah, there's tons of different factors. That's amazing. I totally agree. One of my clients, under the same umbrella of saying, we unlocked and figured out one of her major fears was not being financially stable. And I remember saying something very similar to what you just encouraged. It was like, if you are really gung-ho about having that steady paycheck because you are concerned about, financially paying the bills and stuff, do health. Your other passion is health. Do health and get a health degree and be that nurse that you want to do. And then bring in music in some capacity that feels right to you and add it in and layer it in. So that way your basic needs are met, because you're right. You nailed it right on the money in saying like that artistry and that artist career will take time. And then that can maybe for you be supplemental income or be a hobby, or somehow you can maybe merge the two worlds together in a really beautiful marriage way where you can show up and, I don't know, maybe co-found or found a nonprofit symphony orchestra for medical practitioners. The
Exactly.
possibilities are endless.
Yeah, and there's so many examples of that. My eye doctor is a very accomplished clarinetist who studied at Interlochen and is still an active performer and just has always done both. And like you said, also merging the disciplines and doing something. I've worked with students who are really strong in technology and computer science and also really strong in music. And I work with them to find programs that actually merge those two. And there's so many more opportunities now that that's a possibility. And so I love merging disciplines like that, or music therapy. And, there's so many options.
Yeah, I love that. So since we've kind of unlocked your world with SoundPath and helping musicians pivot, and the fact that you pivoted yourself, let's pivot this conversation into another passion that you hold, and that is to really empower and to give great resources for those studio flute instructors. But what you need to do is, and I think Christine will agree with me on this point, one of my soapboxes is, if you're going to start that studio, you need to think entrepreneurially. You need to act as and position yourself as the CEO of your business. You need to show up in that way because you are literally trading time and talents for a paycheck. And if you treat it like a hobby, you're going to get hobby results. But if you show up as that CEO of Flute blank studio, then you're going to get business results. So what sort of resources or encouragement you would like to give the 360er who is thinking about establishing their own studio?
Yeah, I love all of what you said, and I couldn't agree more. I've helped several of my former students in developing their studios and running it like a business, which I think is really important because I guess some of the ways that I think about it are, I had the mindset many years ago that business was a bad thing, like many musicians did, because oh no, we can't talk about business. We can't think about business because that's going to detract from our artistry. And that was the mentality for so many years. And then also in academia, the whole business world to me seemed like a polar opposite. And it took time to really get a better understanding of it. And one of the things that really helped me was actually looking at running a business from an academic structure. And
Interesting. Okay.
yeah.
Continue.
Okay. So most academic positions have kind of three pillars of responsibility, and that's teaching, research, and service. So that's how most positions are structured. And when I started to think, like, that's actually how you run a business in a lot of ways. And so using that kind of structure and those categories is a really good way for me to think about running a business. And I also, I'll talk kind of about those three different areas and ways to kind of develop each area. Because so the first one is teaching, and that is basically, you can think of it as working in the business. So you're being a technician, you're doing what you do. You're teaching the flute lessons, and that's the thing that you do. And that's where most people stop. That's what they do, and that's enough.
Yeah.
And some people, that's all they want, and that's fine. So that's not necessarily a business, but you're doing your thing. And I also like to incorporate Michael Gerber's entrepreneurial theory from the book The E-Myth. It's a classic book I would recommend anyone to read. And so looking at that role as the technician. And so in that role, your job is to deliver your expertise with excellence. Like, that's what you're doing. You're teaching your lessons, or you're performing, whatever that is. So in that, some ways to up level what you're doing is one thing is to identify what your unique strengths are. So instead of just thinking of just teaching technique or something, maybe you have a really great background in orchestral excerpts. If you have a lot of orchestral experience, then you want to try to attract students that are interested in that. Or if you can improvise, or if you can do many different styles of music, you really want to showcase that, because you want to attract students. You want to be really specific in the type of students you attract. You don't want just anybody. And I've worked with some of my students on this, that they said, oh, if I implement this policy, I know I'm going to lose this person. And I said, well, will you be that sad if you lost that person? Because they're actually really difficult. And they were right. That person did leave the studio, but they also had a policy in place about lesson cancellations and these type of things. And so you always want to think about the type of client that you want to attract. So that's one thing. And then also a holistic approach of really incorporating things like performance anxiety. And so I do a lot of that in my practice, of covering those type of things, and then collaborating with experts. And so some examples of that, of ways to add value to your studio, is bring in people with other expertise, whether it be a one-off thing or it could be a regular occurrence, but somebody like an Alexander technique specialist or peak performance coach, an audition coach, those type of things. Because if students see that you have these offerings, it's going to make your studio more attractive. And so in my practice, I already mentioned my essay coach. So that's one of the first things that I realized I needed outside expertise. And you shouldn't try to do everything yourself, because it's draining and you're not really serving your clients that well. So if there's something you want to offer and you feel like you could get better expertise, that's a great sign to bring someone on. Mm-hmm. And so I have an amazing essay coach who can just draw stories out of students, and she's so great with them. And then I also have somebody she has several music degrees, but she also has a degree in psychology. And she's really great at dealing with performance anxiety and learning differences. And I found that so many students have anxiety. Almost any student I deal with has some level of anxiety or learning difference. and to really address that and incorporate that into your practice. So I think all of those type of things they can think about. And then, as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, of emphasizing the benefit of music study beyond just learning the instrument, and talk about all of those things, because I think that really adds value and a deep understanding of what they're really getting from studying.
I love that. Yeah.
So that's the teacher role, the technician.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go on? Or
yeah, I would love to. So, and I love the fact, because I'm a very like organized person, which I know you are, and I'm a very visual person. I love your concept of pillars, you know? So yeah, if you want to go through the other pillars, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I have to have a little organization when I'm thinking through these things, because I have a little ADHD. Otherwise, I'm kind of all over the place, or like go down so many rabbit holes. So, yes.
You're literally talking to like your other self. ADHD, ethnomusicology, sound path consulting. Yes, yes, yes.
I know. I love that. I love it. Okay, so the next pillar is the research, and that can be, so that's, you can think of that as working on the business. So instead of in the business, you're working on the business. And the Michael Gerber role for that would be the manager. And so in that role, your job is to improve the systems or improve and develop systems and processes to sustain the business. So you're thinking more of like, how are you doing the business?
Yep.
And so with that, and that's the part some people start to become uncomfortable with, and they feel like that's not really in their wheelhouse. But in this area, some of the important things are to stay current. And so professional development in the academic world, that's professional development. And presenting at conferences or performing, recording, that type of thing. In the business side, it would be joining associations or joining peer groups, Flute 360, that type of thing. Is you cannot get a better way of staying on top of the trends, and also having a sounding board to bounce your ideas off to see what other people are doing. So that's a really, really great way to stay current. And so examples like what I've been doing, I'm in the NFA pedagogy committee, and that just has been a great way to, to stay current and see how people are teaching and to look at the new repertoire. And I'm also a member of the College Music Society, and I'm in a few cohorts. They have these each year. And so I'm in a cohort on AI in music, which is very fascinating. And then one that's on inclusive pedagogy in music. And so these are ways just that I can stay current and then also bring value to what I'm doing, basically anything that I'm doing. And so to think of those, and what can you do both on a national level, international, and also local? Like are there organizations you can join locally to be a part of and to have a local presence, and then on a bigger scale? And then a couple other things are to upskill and think of ways that you can innovate. So it's so easy now to get micro credentials, badges, certificates, those type of things, just to give you a little edge that you can do. Yeah, so those things are great. I mean, I even there's so many online things. I did a certificate in improvisation through Berklee School of Music online program. And I've done the Smithsonian, I forget what it's called, but it's basically a global music pedagogy certificate. And others, I've done the certificate in independent educational consulting, and just all of those things are just ways to add value to what you do and to establish yourself as an expert. And it also helps. You mentioned imposter syndrome. So the more of this type of thing you stay active in, it really gives you the confidence to do what you're doing, because you're staying up on these type of things. So those are some of the things. And then also business optimization, kind of once you get into a little bit more, to think of another book that I read. I can't remember the title right now, but this author's kind of catchphrase was optimize, automate, and outsource, in that order.
Okay.
Which I love, because you're you want to kind of go through what do you do to intake a new client? What are the steps that you do? You want to kind of optimize that process. And then once you have it down, what is the most efficient way of doing that? And then you automate it. You use tools. And I really recommend starting out using free tools. There's so many. And I can throw out a couple. I know you use Calendly, and I use that also. I think that's a great way to just make it so much easier to schedule a lesson. And there's also platforms specifically for music teachers. And then things like Google Suite also to like track progress of students, or you can get a free CRM like HubSpot. These all have free levels. And for finance, it's like for bookkeeping. I don't know if you're familiar with Wave. It's a bookkeeping platform.
Okay.
Wave, that's what I used at first, and it's very, very robust. You can do invoicing, you can link it to your bank account, and you can collect payments that way. And they have a free level, and it's amazing. And so that also leads me to highly encourage anyone to actually form an LLC and completely separate your business from your personal, because then you can track, if you use something like Wave for your financials, you can track your expenses, you can deduct them. And once you can start doing that, you're much more inclined to actually invest in your business, because you can actually track how much you're investing and how much you're taking your income is. And so it's much easier to track than if you're just casually depositing that into your personal account and kind of commingling. And also the IRS doesn't really like the commingling of personal and business.
No, they do not.
No, they don't. So we want to stay away from that. So, and another resource that I really love and encourage is the organization SCORE. So it's score.org. You familiar with that?
I am not.
So it's this amazing organization, and so anybody can just Google just go to score.org. It's an acronym, I believe, and I'm not sure what it stands for, but it's basically a network of retired business professionals, and they all volunteer, and they have amazing resources. They'll give webinars. You can join a local chapter. You can do in-person workshops or networking activities and like networking lunches, that type of thing. And they have live webinars. They have a whole on-demand library and a ton of templates, worksheets, kind of, you can develop a business plan, you can download it. And then best of all, they have mentors. You can sign up and they'll pair you with a mentor at any stage of your business. And so it's just a really great resource. So I really recommend all of those. And then as you grow, then you can sort of level up and get the next level of a paid, because a lot of the platforms have a more robust paid level, but you don't need to do that at first. You can do almost everything for free.
Yes. I love everything you're saying. So circling back to something that started this entire conversation, and that was thinking more businessly. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think a lot of artists think, if I think like a CEO, if I show up and position myself as the business owner and think businessly, it's going to take away from my art. And that is such a falsehood. If anything, it adds to the art. Because the more I'm a businesswoman, the better my artistry is.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like when I get to show up and have communications with the parents of students who may or may not want to work with me, and I need to articulate in a way what I do, how I do it, how I'm different from other flute teachers in the area, I show up more, and I show up more confidently, and I'm more articulate, and I know how I want to structure my business and what brings me joy and what I'm attracted to. And you get to structure, just like what you're saying with the pillars, you get to structure that organization for yourself around the life that you want to lead, the life that you want to build with your family. And the fact that I get to, and any musicpreneur out there gets to mold that for themselves, I'm a better artist because of it. So I think that there are a lot of falsehoods out there that, and a lot of myths that are out there that we need to debunk. And having conversations like this is pointing all of us in in the right direction. You being a musicpreneur does not take away from your art. If anything, it enhances it. And I think you would agree with that notion.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel like any skill you acquire, whether it's, just anything, it could be musical or non-musical, it all informs each other. And that was something I learned specifically in music when I was studying African music and klezmer and all of these things. When I'd go back to play my flute, like I was transcribing these klezmer solos with all these microtones and everything. When I would go back and play, like my intonation was so much more refined, or my sense of rhythm, those type of things. And I feel it's the same outside of music when you gain other skills, because it makes you, like you said, more confident. And also, to me, it's also when I transition from doing something on the business, for example, and then I perform, it's you have this sense of more of like, oh, I'm in this world. Like you have this confidence. Sometimes in the business world, you can, imposter syndrome, everybody has that. If it's like something that you're not, as an academic, you're so hyper focused, and you have to kind of step back and take in this broader view, which I'll get to in the last pillar. But I feel like I agree with you so much that it does really inform your artistry in such a major way.
Yeah. So the piece we are giving you, the 360er, is embrace it, embrace the microtones of another culture's music, embrace the SBAs, the Small Business Administration networking events, embrace being a public speaker, embrace and, kind of dabble, and whatever field you're kind of stepping into, whether it's public speaking, podcasting, being on social media, research, whatever it is. You're right, Christine. It informs. So when you come back to being a teacher or you come back to being a performer, you're going to be strengthened and empowered in really amazing ways.
Absolutely. And it gets you to think things that you hadn't even thought of before in music and in other ways, because you have a sort of new frame of reference and way of analyzing or looking at things. And you also see something that you never saw before.
Boom. Yes.
Yeah.
1000%. Cool.
Yeah.
So can you unlock the last pillar for us?
Yeah. So the last one is, in the academic world, it's service or community engagement. And so in Michael Gerber's terms, this would be the entrepreneur. So wearing the entrepreneur hat. So we had the teacher, the manager, or sorry, the technician, which is the teacher, the manager, and the entrepreneur. So in this role, like I said, you're kind of stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, and you're creating a broader impact and thinking of ways to grow through with your vision and innovation. And so some of the things in this category would be ways to engage locally. So in this way, you can, and again, you're positioning yourself as an expert. You can offer local Q&A sessions or workshops, create resource kits, different things like that can be on different topics, navigating college or taking auditions or different career paths, those type of things. Or public performances, of course, collaborations. So some of the things that I do, as an example, I do pro bono work with this organization that's called Scholar Match, and they pair experienced counselors with students from marginalized community or first gen students. And I was really excited to do this work because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a first gen student, and I really identify with those, those specific issues that they have. And so that kind of work is really rewarding. And then also I present for youth orchestras or community music schools, that type of thing. And it's a way, basically, you can think of reframing service as a way of gaining visibility and basically establishing yourself as an expert, gaining trust, and then also actually having a meaningful impact on the community. So it's sort of killing all these birds with one stone by doing this.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love all of it. And it's structured so well. And it's like, kind of I mean, again, it's easier said than done, but it can really be that simple, steps, columns 1, 2, and 3. And what I heard, in column 2, when you were unpacking it and the amazing resources that you were pointing, 2 and 4, 360 years to use and possibly implement, start off free, start off basic, right? You don't have to have, and that's the biggest thing I think, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouths, but what I perceive is I think people perceive that they have to have it all sorted out before they go. And maybe, just maybe in our classically trained world as flutists, we're kind of told under this notion of like, you don't put it out into the world, you don't record, you don't perform until it's perfect. And maybe we're taking that idea and bringing it into the projects, the businesses that we want to create, but we don't launch, we don't hit publish because we think it has to be air quote perfect. I have to have the LLC, I have to have the website, I have to have all these layers, the QuickBooks, the Calendly, all of that at once, make it perfect, and then release it. Well, guess what? You're never going to hit publish. It's never going to get out into the world, because I've been in business since 2009, and my business has pivoted at least 100 million times these past 15 years. And I'm, right now still at a crossroads of where I want to be with my 4 businesses. And I am like contemplating dumping 2 of them, to the curb and saying, I'm going to put you over here, and then I may or may not pick you up later. And I have to be okay with that. And you have to be okay with that. You don't have all the answers. You'll never have all of your ducks in a row. And yeah, it's messy, but that's why I think like musicians could be the best entrepreneurs out there, bar none. And the reason being is because we get messy with our practice. We experiment with tone colors. We experiment with articulation styles. We experiment with all the things with our beautiful silver tube. So you have the skill sets, like what you're saying earlier, how law schools and medical schools love hiring and love accepting music students, because they know how to collaborate through chamber. They know how to listen with intonation. They know how to, and you can take all those skill sets from your instrument, from orchestra, from your training in your world, and bring it over into business. And being a businesswoman, like, I'm successful because of a lot of things, but one main thing is I attribute it to my music training. I listen to my clients. I know how to structure things. Do you know what I mean? And so I think musicians are so afraid of wearing that CEO cap for everything that we had talked about before. But there are so many skill sets that can come from your music world into business. And you just start off with the Calendly page. That's it. Start off with that. Start booking students. And then maybe 6 months later, then you establish the LLC. Then 6 months later, maybe then you onboard a virtual assistant. Do you know what I mean? You can't possibly have all the layers to your onion completely all packaged together before you start chomping away.
Yeah, I totally love that, because, and you're spot on in saying that we are taught and become such perfectionists. We have to be, as performers, you have to have such high standards and go to such a granular level. And that's one of the things, it's both a strength and a weakness. And because it can really become a roadblock. And you're so right in saying that can be what stops people. Like, it has to be perfect before you release it. But you just have to become comfortable with doing things, like you said, in stages, and doing something. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to have big, fancy branded everything. You can just have a contract on a Word document and that's it. It doesn't, even if you don't even have a logo, that's fine. It's a step in the process. And that's why I also mentioned the growth mindset, because you have to always be wanting to learn more and to improve and to change. And just like how you're comfortable with maybe ditching 2 of your businesses, it's not like you got this business and it's done. It will never be done. Just like we as artists you never finish practicing. Any professional high-level musician is always still practicing, still learning, still taking lessons. I mean, so many orchestral musicians are still taking lessons, for different things that they want to improve. And that's a sign of a really great musician, is somebody who continuously improves no matter what level they're at. And so it's the same thing. If you can transfer that mindset to the business world, you're bound for success.
Perfectly said. Love it. So I have already stolen up so much of your time, and I thank you so much, but I want to put a beautiful bow on this amazing conversation. And I know you have a fantastic gift for the 360ers out there. Can you tell them what it is?
Yeah, I have a toolkit for studio teachers of ways that they can just kind of some of the things that I mentioned to differentiate themselves and to become more comfortable in the business world, and just point them at some resources, free and some paid resources, and just some brainstorming ideas that they can just use little piece at a time to get their business going.
That is so kind of you. Thank you so much for that generosity.
Of course, I'm happy to do so. I'm a big fan of the 360 world.
Oh, thank you. That means the world to me. So how can people contact you if they want to pick your brain further or possibly work with you?
So they can go to my website, which I'm sure you'll have in the show notes. So it's mysoundpath.com. And the email is info@mysoundpath.com. So those are the two ways to get me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Christine, for your time. And thank you so much for your expertise and your passion in serving others. You have such a heart of servitude, and that is rare. And I thank you for your commitment to your students and to your clients. Thank you for your commitment to the research that you have your hands on. And thank you for showing up and just sharing that love and passion and devotion to our community, because it really is unique and it grabbed my attention. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and congrats on everything that you do. It's amazing. So you're such a valuable resource to the community.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review through your favorite podcast app, such as Apple, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, among others. Thanks. Let's talk about flute.